Hello, everyone. While I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, it is clear that we are on the brink of a destructive collapse of the neoliberal system, with the recent bank failures of SVB and Signature Bank, which are now under investigation by the U.S. Senate, the crises faced by Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank, and the de-dollarization efforts of Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and others to escape this contagion. Stuck between so-called quantitative tightening to curb inflation and quantitative easing to bail out banks and their worthless financial assets, there is absolutely no solution within the present financial system as it is organized. Instead of doing away with this antiquated system, the controllers of the U.S. government are desperately grasping onto every last straw, the final straw being World War III. The U.S. and its NATO allies have been preparing for this moment since 2014, when they destabilized Ukraine during the Maidan coup to pressure cook the conflict that is now called the Ukraine-Russia war. They know that the neoliberal financial system is completely unsustainable in the long run, and the only way they can keep pumping life back into it is through their racketeering in every country across the globe. We have a non-exhaustive list of imperialist American and NATO-backed interventions into Latin America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa, dating back to as early as the 20th century. And that list continues into the present day and not upon deaf ears. In response to the various imperialist efforts and policies of NATO, this past week we have seen an overwhelming resistance from the people within NATO countries and leaders of the global South. This past weekend, we saw millions of demonstrators take to the streets in France and protest against President Emmanuel Macron's reform to push back the retirement age from 62 to 64 in order to slash pensions without a parliament vote. Macron's plan was passed in spite of the hyperinflation in energy prices and the euro's steep decline in purchasing parity for the past year, thereby blaming the people of France rather than the poor economic policies and decisions of the European Union. The strikes interrupted public transportation, oil refineries, schools, and other institutions and services. In Germany, from March 22nd to 24th, there was a public sector strike organized by the Public Employees Union Verdi, shutting down Germany's largest port, Hamburg Port Authority. The entrance to the port of Hamburg was closed. Ships requiring pilotage to steer them into port can neither enter nor leave the port. Media reports have stated that over 16,000 people all across Germany have joined the movement. The union is expecting thousands of employees from hospitals and daycare centers to join the movement after their next round of talks on March 27th. Alongside these protests, leaders from the Global South spoke out against the hypocrisy of the U.S.'s list of so-called human rights violators. In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador called out the U.S. State Department, saying that they are, quote, liars who believe they are the government of the world and only see the mote in the eye of the other, not the beam in their own. He then questioned the legitimacy of the U.S.'s own credentials as a democratic, rules-based country. Quote, why do you keep Julian Assange imprisoned? If we are talking about acts of violence, how is it that an award-winning journalist in the United States maintains that the U.S. government sabotaged the gas pipeline from Russia to Europe, referring to Nord Stream? Why does the United States allow a cartel or various cartels to freely operate in that country, distributing fentanyl, which does such harm to youth? Ask them, what are you doing so that youth do not consume fentanyl? He asks very good questions that we, as a nation, have yet to answer or face the consequences for. When will we follow the same just and democratic principles that we have laid out for ourselves since the inception of our country? The Global South and the populations within NATO countries are fighting the same battle against the oligarchical rule of NATO since World War II. This movement has ignited a new sector of the globe called the global majority. We are already making strides towards a new paradigm, as seen with China's Global Security Initiative presented in February and reiterated this past week at the Moscow visit, the first China-Central Asia summit coming up in May, the restoration of Saudi-Iranian relations and now Saudi-Syrian relations, and the waning support from the people of NATO nations towards backing the Ukrainian war effort. We must not halt the progress of history, but push forward towards a future of beautiful cooperation if we hope to survive NATO's destruction. Less than 3 weeks from today, the Schiller Institute will convene the conference. Without the development of all nations, there can be no lasting peace for the planet. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the chairwoman of the Schiller Institute, has also issued a statement calling for a separate conference to be convened among all nations, addressing the immediate urgency to reorganize the bankrupt financial system. The April 15 conference will convene those world citizens who recognize the necessity to organize that second conference that Helga called for. Given the present behavior of the U.S. Federal Reserve and European central banks, other nations from around the globe, including China, Russia, and India most prominently, must not only attend, but take a leading role in reorganize this doomed-to-fail present financial system. We urge everyone to register for April 15th and to circulate Helga's recent statement. This is Kynan Thistlethwaite from the Schiller Institute. See you again soon.